So in the winter, when the snow fell, I would be there at Alta's door with a snow shovel and shovel out her driveway and her walkways, and she always paid me too much. Well, it was never too much then, but she always paid me a good amount. I got like at least $5 for shoveling her walks and her driveway and the walkway in front of her house. And she had this ginormous old gas stove in her kitchen that had the gas line that ran across the front. It had 6 burners, and she would cook up. I remember she would cook up chicken livers for her dog B. Her dog B was a miniature poodle who was always had kind of squinty, weepy eyes full of kind of goo, and B was around for a long time. That dog lived to be, I think, 15 or 16 years old, and so I went. She was really my friend. I would shovel for her all through my preteen and teen years after my dad died, and I would shovel for her and go over and hang out. And it wasn't until kind of much later on that I figured out that she had probably had an alternate lifestyle. I don't have any proof of that, but she had only one friend, one really close friend that she used to go and stay with, who was an elderly doctor, as I mentioned before, whose name I don't remember. So Alta had a big impact on my life, as I've kind of discovered since then. I have a powerful association with a powerful love of old stoves. I have an antique stove in my kitchen, and 2 more down in the basement that are awaiting me to get my act together to fix up. I kind of credit a lot of my interest in old things from before World War II and from the turn of the century to the time that I spent in Alta's house. I just feel I take a great deal of comfort from old machines and old stuff. So I went off to college, and I visited Alta a couple times after I came back from college, and then she passed away in the early 90s, 92 I think, and that was the last I saw of her. But I think about her a lot, and recently I went looking on, just today, I went looking on Google to see if there was a picture of her that somebody might have posted. And instead I found out that when I searched via her name, I found out that the New Yorker magazine has finally digitized its entire catalog of issues. And there I found 6 entries from On the Town and some other columns in the New Yorker that were written by Alta and Russell Maloney. And these were written from 1942 to 1943. So back when Mrs. Maloney was a young woman, she spent some time down in New York City with her brother Russell, and they started writing entries and sending them into the New Yorker magazine. The thing that I recalled after reading them was that Russell died about 3 years later. Russell died as I mentioned earlier. He died as a seaman in the U.S. Navy during World War II. And what's interesting to note is that when I met Alta and became her friend in the 70s, in the late 60s and early 70s, she was still keeping Russell's room intact. Not quite as a shrine, but pretty much everything was there the way it had been before he died. And this some 40 years later, 30 years later. So I don't know where to take this story, except to say that the internet is an amazing thing, and I was very happy to find out that a little bit of her was still alive on the internet, and it just kind of added a little piece that I never expected to find to her story and her brother. Alta died alone, and as I said, in the early 90s, and when her house was purchased, it was purchased by a neighbor whom she knew, and she had, in addition to keeping Russell's room pretty much intact, it still was intact then 50 years later. She had entire rooms and closets, and then entire rooms filled from floor to ceiling with newspapers. And I believe that those were, or I like to think that those were copies of her columns. So, this is my entry on Alta Maloney. And Alta, I still think about you, even now. That's Julian, and he says bye.